Yo, 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 what's good in the hood? Changing things up since there's no UFC fight nights, no cards, no nothing this week. It's a holiday week, more or less, over here in the States. Good old Thanksgiving, Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, however you want to name it, however you want to celebrate it. Nonetheless, since there's no UFC cards coming up, well, there's one coming up in a few weeks. It's going to be good. I thought let's do a good old reliable, good old tier list. Uh, Personally, I'm already thinking about 2026. We have the Paramount Era coming up, and I don't know how they're going to structure with pay-per-views, but I'm going to go on limb and say they have a lot more money to throw around. There's going to be a lot more hype in the UFC, which means we have dream fights to think about. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying I don't think a lot of these fights will happen. I think some of them are unattainable. Some of them aren't the best. Some of them are really good. But I wanted to throw in a little mix, some that we expect, some that we know of, some that presumably will already happen, and some that are just, are living in our heads. But jumping right into it. And the tier list, just for clarification, this isn't the probability they happen, it's the hype if they happen. And I'm going to go right into it with a good old B tier. Conor Pereira versus Michael Chandler. Let me get this mouse out of the way. Why do I put this in B tier? I think just because if we're going off recent history, Chandler has lost a lot of zest. He's lost a couple fights now. He's still good on the mic ish. Still entertaining to watch. Like he's gonna go out there and essentially put his head first and hit or be hit. So he's still very entertaining to watch. And I was a big fan when he came to the UFC. But at the end of the day, he's lost some fights. Conor has not fought in a while. And I think there's just bigger names out there for Conor to fight. For Conor, this is probably still a pretty winnable fight, especially if it's at welterweight or God knows middleweight at this rate. But I think it's in the middle of the pack. The tough, beef they had that's so far and long gone. They'd have to really restart this, and there was never really much beef to begin with. And other than the tough again, there's no real history. So it's in the middle of the pack. It's definitely good, but it's by no means the best you can get. Moving on, A tier. Peter Yan, Sean O'Malley 2. If you haven't seen this fight, go watch it. This was fight of the year contender in my opinion. A few years back, this was the coming out party for Sean O'Malley. He ended up getting the title fight after this because I believe Peter was number one ranked at the time. Obviously, coming off some those losses to Sterling, but this was a banger of a fight over in the Middle East. So I don't know what the judging. This is one of those fights that it's not just for the entertainment value, is the fact that Peter Young got like screwed. I think if you go on MMA Verdict, like or any of those sites, or wherever, like I believe Sean only like there's only like one credible media source that picked Sean winning that fight, and every other judge or every other like media outlet, it was like 20-1 ratio. That everyone thought it was Peter. It was one of the craziest robberies I've ever seen. But I think in some ways it was overshadowed by the fact that it was just an entertaining fight. They both got rocked. But regardless, like obviously Sean's coming off some losses to Merab. On the flip side, Peter is about to fight Merab for the second time. I don't expect Peter to win, and Sean's kind of at a limbo where he's not going to get a title fight unless Merab loses. That's why he's honestly banking that Peter wins. So it could be a rematch for the belt, but my prediction is going to be that Peter loses, maybe a competitive fight, and Sean's just lurking, trying to gauge the scene, and they should run this back. I mean, at the end of the day, it was a very entertaining fight. Stylistically, it's very fun too because Peter's got that boxing style on top of some unique takedowns, and Sean, on the other hand, he was not getting completely doused like wet blanket style by Peter, but it was just something where it was a perfect mix of striking along with some chaotic scrambling and whatnot, and they got bloody, they got rocked. Like this is as close to S tier as you can get. The only reason it's not S tier is because they're not fighting for anything legacy or belts or anything. I think it's just a good old fashioned. We need to close out who's the better of the two fighters. Moving on, throw a wild card out here. Can't put in S tier just yet, but Dylan Danis versus Mr. John Pork. Now, why is this on here? Well, Dylan Danis, obviously, he's a I believe a world champ over in a far off far off MMA promotion. I don't even know the name of it, but he is a world champ. Shanko, John Pork, however you want to call him. I don't want him to come hating on me, so we'll call him Shanko for now. Shanko, he just did it was a Dana White Contender Series, had a really good outing, had like 200 plus significant strikes, I believe, in 15 minutes. He's pretty popular now, has like 500 plus followers on Instagram. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to the fact that it was about 2 weeks ago, Madison Square Garden, Dylan Danis got kicked out after getting jumped by like 10 of those Dagestani boys, and the leader of that attack was none other than Chanko. He got some back of the head shots, so I think on that alone, this fight would be very entertaining to put like maybe as like the first on a main card for one of the Paramount cards, like right at the start of the main card. I think only because Chaco himself is going to be someone that's going to start pushing through. I believe he's lightweight, so he's definitely someone that once they put him on the main roster, I could see him, progressing up to like top 15 around. Danis, on the other hand, he's very one dimensional, but he's just so goddamn entertaining. I think he's hilarious in interviews with Hawani and whatnot, Bisping, all that stuff. The problem is this is never going to happen. Dana White's already like essentially supposedly banned him from all future events, even if he pays, and they have not committed to signing him. And I think Danis recognizes there's a lot more money outside and all these novelty promotions than there is to make, if he was making 100 and 100, you got like a good deal to start. That's still peanuts compared to probably like getting 250 to 500 to fight cans and whatnot, or just do novelty fights with Logan Paul. So, do I expect it to happen? Hell no. Would I like to see it? Hell yeah. Moving on. Is that Bob and Weave? This one, I lean towards S, but I think you have to go A just because in some ways it's lost on the zest. Nunes versus Shevchenko, Valentina, 3. Why is this a dream fight? I think just Valentina. They were two close fights, right? And I believe they were at the women's bantamweight division. So perhaps if Valentina has some time to bulk up this time around and re-prepare for that, I think it's just to give Valentina her justice, where she just came off the fight with Zhang Wei Li. She's established herself as the pound for pound, sorry, Kayla Harris, and they've already kind of slipped out the rumor that the first Paramount main event in January is potentially going to be Amanda Nunes coming out of retirement to fight Kayla Harrison. And frankly, that's a fight where I could see Kayla Harrison losing, which would be fun because it sets up Valentina to go for double belt status. And on top of that, to get a redemption against Amanda Nunes, who is considered the GOAT all time. Obviously not active pound for pound, but if she comes out of retirement, I think it just gives Valentina all this, opportunity to get back what in some ways, at least the second fight with Nunes, where like a lot of people picked her to win, judges wise and all that. Um, Close robbery, hard to say, but at the end of the day, I think Valentina, she's been putting some good work in. She's a, as they say, a company man. So I'd say give it to her. It's maybe just, I don't want to say just because it's a women's MMA fight. I don't know if it transcends into that S tier, and I'm not even sure if it's possible because it's very likely that either Amanda Nunes just retires after fighting Kayla Harrison, or if Kayla Harrison wins, I don't know why Amanda Nunes would hang around afterwards. But I like it, and I think timeline wise, like I said, if Amanda wins in January against Kayla Harrison, put that on the white card, the white card, uh, the White House card. But yeah, put that on there. I think that'd be a fun little thing if they're gonna put like 3 or 4 title fights. That one would be very fun. Again, you're chasing double champ status, all that good stuff. Moving on. This one's a curveball. I guess it's B tier, but I'm gonna switch the order because it's definitely better than Chandler. And I'll move these afterwards as I complete the list. Why am I putting Conor versus Justin? If you're hardcore and you know. This was something that was rumored at times a few years back, here and there. Justin wanted the fight. Obviously, Justin's manager is Alia Dabasaliz, and he's obviously the manager of Khabib, Islam, all that. So he always was pushing for that because it's for Justin. It was something like, hey, it's a good way for him to lock in his status to get like the lightweight title fight at the time when he was chasing it. And on top of that, it's just something where Justin, he doesn't seem to have a lot of respect for Conor. Conor clearly didn't have enough respect to want to fight him, and Justin, even around 3 or 4 years ago, was a pretty big name, especially in the lightweight division. And while stylistically, it's probably a dangerous fight for Conor if he wants to avoid ever getting completely flatlined. And Justin at lightweight no less, at lightweight no less, has killed a lot of contenders here and there. And like I said, it's not like he's putting them TKO or this and that. He is putting them out. But why am I putting that on there? Because at the end of the day, Conor needs to come back and fight. It depends on what his end goal is. Is he going to go back to lightweight? Is he going to try to chase a fight with Ilia Topuria, BMF with maybe like Charles or Max? Who knows what it is? But he needs a tune-up fight. I'm not saying Justin's a tune-up fight. I'm actually perceiving it more that Justin's not going to get the title fight against Ilia. It's probably going to go to Arman based off the results last week. Therefore, Justin said he's going to retire. But again, to a degree, he's a company man. He's taking some fights that he didn't need to take. Like he took the Holloway fight, ended up having the worst KO in history and this and that. And he probably could have gone the title fight if he had waited out after the Dustin KO. But I'd say that Justin's very popular. Obviously, Conor, needs to have some sort of fight that's winnable, but also something that's going to be entertaining for the general audience. I think you slap this on the White House, it would it would draw a lot of attention, and you're guaranteed someone's getting finished, even in 3 rounds. But it's honestly, compared to Chandler, a lot tougher fight for Conor. Justin's going to stand up, but the difference between him and Chandler is Justin's a lot more tight, and I think he's got significantly more power than Chandler. So you run the risk of getting KO'd in your return, and at that point probably retiring from the UFC afterwards. So, but I think it's something that it was chased maybe a few years back. It's lost its zest, and Justin's not as active, so it's hard to put an A tier, but perhaps we can go higher. Moving on, we have a few remaining ones. I don't want to say this is a crummy fight. Jorge versus Leon Edwards. This was something that was teased, years back after the three-piece and soda, the whole shebang. And Jorge was obviously at the peak of his career at that time. Leon was still kind of an up and comer. The problem now is Leon is at a downward skid of 3 fights. He's lost in a row, coming off a pretty bad. He got some gas. Excuse me. Ooh. Where was I? Yeah, Leon. He's coming off a submission loss. He's coming off losing his belt. He's coming off pretty bad KO to Carlos Prata. So he's already gonna have to take some months to recalibrate this and that. Jorge, he was on a losing skid, disappeared, started his own little like boxing bare knuckle s promotion. So he's definitely had his his focus is definitely diluted from trying to be a mixed martial artist. But now that they have the White House card announced, this and that, he's obviously a MAGA boy. Seems to be pretty on good terms with Trumpy. He could probably get the sway to do it just because he's still a popular name. The problem is he can't fight anyone that's like upper echelon. And Leon at this stage is someone that he could probably have a competitive fight with. And they're both still big names. The problem, obviously, is we waited way too long for this. So it's lost a lot of zest. And don't get me wrong, Dana and the whole promotion crew, they can definitely compile something, build this up, put those two I think in the same room. They'll probably still carry that same energy to a degree. It's just not good timing. That's why you have to put it C. And I don't even know if it's. I mean, it's probably pretty reasonable to happen. It just depends on I don't know what Jorge's current deal is with the UFC and how much money he's going to ask for that because he's not going. That probably wouldn't go on the main card. I'd put that as definitely prelims if it's going to be in the White House. Moving on. I think this one's all reliable, but and it's already been overdone way too much, especially if you've followed their kickboxing career. Adesanya, Pereira, 3. MMA, of course. So I think that would be number 5 across kickboxing included. Why is this a dream fight? Because I think Adesanya has nothing else to do at middleweight. Pereira's not coming down to middleweight. And Adesanya, he obviously took a crack at the lightweight against Jan Blachowicz, fellow Pole. And he came up short. It was like, it was like a 2 to 3, 4 to 1 round split, but he got taken down constantly. The reason why I still think this is a nice dream fight is because it gives Adesanya something to prove. Something, can he get that second belt? And honestly, he should have to fight someone at light heavyweight first before he does this. Maybe put him against Ilia, who knows? But I don't know. At the end of the day, I find they're very entertaining fights, very high level kickboxing, and as we've seen, they have pretty high rate of finishes. So It really depends on what Pereira's schedule is, but Adesanya is in a limbo right now where he could try to get, back in the middleweight picture, but he's just fought so many times and he's got now a couple losses on his tally there. So it's like I mean, he's a thin frame, so I would say maybe see if he has time to bulk up to light heavyweight, get one win maybe against, like I say, Yuri, something around January, February on one of the early Paramount cards, reestablish himself with a nice flashy win, and then slap him a prayer. And that really just depends on where prayer is booked. But not the most hyped, I'd say, dream fight, but it's still something that I think it's over reliable, just like the good old tier lists are, and it's something that I think that the average fan's gonna appreciate. The high level fan, they might be a little iffy and be like, "There's better options for both of them," frankly, but it is what it is. Moving on. This one's been talked about a lot. I'm gonna put it more on the bottom of the A tier. I'll be frank though, I think I'm gonna put it a little higher. Sorry, ladies. Merab versus Volkanovski. Obviously, there's a lot of asterisks to this. The first one being that Merab has already been proposed this and probably internally was offered this by Dana, and he's already said no. He respects Volk too much, which is it's admirable. I think they're both well likable, well liked like champions and this and that. So there'd be no heat there. It's purely just to test the legacy. Merab obviously has respect for him, but he also implies that Volk's just too big, and Volk definitely is a big, stocky, good wrestler. He would be a very tough matchup for Merab, but it's hard not to envision how that would go. Would Merab, because obviously Volks has tough losses to Islam. The second time, the tough loss to Ilia. But in both those cases, there's asterisks. I mean, he took the short nose fight against Islam, and then he took the fight against Ilia only like 3 months after getting head kicked. So other than that, Volk has not been in a position. He's not been in a position where he's been like utterly dominated, whereas Merab on his current streak is dominating everyone, and it makes you think: could Merab do what he's been doing to his last couple fights? Could he put Volk in deep waters, make him tired? Which again, Volk has pretty good cardio. I would say for featherweights, he puts a high pace. He can wrestle. He can defend takedowns. He can defend submissions. He can kickbox. He can box. He can do everything. He's very well rounded. But I think underrated wise, he has some pretty superb cardio. So I think it would be a very frantic, high paced bout. The problem is that Volk has a lot of contenders lurking, and I'm not even sure if he'll be champion, by let's say the summer of White House, where this could obviously happen. And in the case of Merab, he's fighting every 2 to 3 months, so his frequency of losing is also, for lack of better words, a little higher, just because you're constantly fighting these high level strikers, high level opposition. So, and if Merab doesn't want it, Volk's not going down, so it probably won't happen. But if it did happen, obviously Merab gets to join that elite, two division club. But I think it would be just awesome. Like you can't complain with it, and there's just so many asterisks as to how this might play out. Moving on, Connor's a popular man. He seems to always be lurking. I'm gonna put this as the one of the higher tiers. So Connor versus Max. This would be a rematch. They fought way back, like 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever years ago. This was very early on both their careers. I want to say maybe Max's debut too. Went to a decision too, which is crazy too. And Connor actually employed some wrestling. I don't know if he got injured that fight, but it was very young in their careers. I think that's why it would be one of those things where Max is still riding a pretty decent wave after his last win. And although Max has already tentatively booked, the rumor would be him versus Oliveira. They're gonna have their rematch this time for the BMF belt. The reality is Connor, he needs to fight for something. It's got to be legacy. It's got to be some sort of rematch, like I said, or some sort of beef. Even though he just went on like a 36-hour psychedelic journey, so he seems to be now good Connor, not evil Connor. But him versus Max would be very entertaining. Both striking, both good with their kicks, this and that. Both presumably gonna be very respectful. Max has a chance to right the wrong, get a win back. He's only lost to a handful of guys across the board in UFC. It's like Dustin, which you guys win back. Obviously Ilia, which he probably would try to get that back. Volk, which he never got back. But Conor, I think it would be fun, and if you can put it for the BMF, very marketable. Obviously, the contingency is on if Max can get past Charles, which I kind of lean Charles in that one, so that's why this might not happen. And again, there's really no like heat or anything. And yeah, I don't know. It's definitely one of the more popular fights I think Connor could take on his return. The other problem is can Connor make lightweight? Because I don't expect Max. I mean, he could do this at welterweight. It doesn't seem viable for him. I feel like he's starting to fill out that frame for lightweight. Why force him to be at a disadvantage while PED Connor's returning? But at this point, we might as well go to the next one. This one was rumored way back when Dustin and Connor fought for, was it the third time? I believe Connor, go look this up because maybe I'm crazy. I believe Connor had a Brazilian mouth guard because obviously his intention was beat Dustin, challenge for the belt again, and take on Charles at probably the peak of his popularity at the time. He ended up obviously blowing his leg out, so that never transpired. But I think it's very intriguing, as I just alluded to before. The reality is, Max and Charles are already booked. It depends on how late they want to book that. If they're going to push that to the White House, I hope not. I hope they get some activity because they're both coming off wins and they both don't seem to be too damaged or hurt. So the expectation is Charles versus Max. My early prediction would probably be Charles to win. Honestly, by finish too. Now that we saw Max get finished, it's more tangible to see that happen again. But Charles versus Connor, oh my god, that would be a fight. Mainly because I think Charles, even though he's been a little more reserved with his striking and his danger, and as I keep talking about this has to go as A because it's probably the best return fight for him, and it definitely because Charles is probably the most popular man out of those three I already met or four I already mentioned. He's definitely more popular than Holloway, Justin, and Chandler. I can just imagine Oliveira throwing caution to the wind like he did during his title reign, where he's just going to go right into the pocket and just try to go for the finish. And I could see it going, 1-2 rounds max. And I think it's very winnable for Conor too. So for Conor, that could be a really good, I think, make or break. Is assuming Oliveira wins, he has the BMF, so you get the BMF belt. You're being Charles, who, sure, he's had some hiccups. He lost to Armin, he lost to Ilia, he lost to Islam, but you beat Oliveira, it could set him up for a title fight after that. Who knows? But I think stylistically, it's probably, even though Charles could easily push to the takedowns and just go for submission because that's Connor's one of his weak points. I think if the stars align, this should be the fight you should seriously consider, assuming Oliveira fights early enough this year and is ready to go for the White House. Moving on, I'm gonna try to get some of the good ones now. Jones versus Aspinall. It would have gone in S tier, but due to recent events, I'm gonna put it somewhere in the middle of A tier. Why is that? We all know Aspinall got like his eyes gouged pretty badly, for better or worse, and it showed some. It showed some. It made him look less invincible, and it makes it look more realistic when you fight against the goat of eye pokes. That it doesn't feel like it's going to be a blowaway victory for Aspinall anymore. Is it still very entertaining? Yes, and it's going to still be very entertaining when Aspinall hopefully gets his rematch and beats Serial Gain. You heard it right there. That's Mr. Serial. But even if he gets past Serial, he's going to have to do it in such a dramatic, 2 rounds or less type, just like he's done for his last like 10 opponents, to keep that zest that aura that he lost. I mean, he lost a portion of it. He didn't lose all of it because if you're a true student of the game, you recognize that he really couldn't do anything if he couldn't see. Like, sure, he was getting pieced up here and there by Serial, and he didn't look like the I finished everyone in sub 1 round. Aspinall that we had seen the last few years. But at the end of the day, he is the number one heavyweight. Jones is the former champ. And Jones looked obviously very good against Serial in his and he looked pretty good against Stipe too. So I'd still say it's up there. And there's definitely some internal, we'll say, bad blood that could be pulled out if it's put on the White House. I don't know if it's main event worthy, but it could be the co. It just comes down to, can Tom get the win, and does John Jones get booked with someone else, which moves on to. I have some reservations for this fight, mainly because if it's gonna happen even at light heavyweight, which I don't know if it would, I just feel like Pereira, even though he looked good against Maga Ankalaev, He looked good since Ankalaev. Obviously, the first fight he didn't win, but he stopped all the takedowns. And then the second fight, he obviously came out like a man possessed and killed that guy in like sub 2 minutes. The problem is Pereira's weakness is always going to be grappling, even though he has some good coaches and Glover, Teixeira, and this and that. And he's definitely working his weak point jiu-jitsu, his weak point takedown defense, and he doesn't look bad. The problem is if this goes to heavyweight, it just feels like something where he's at a huge disadvantage unless he has enough time to bulk versus John Jones, who has been bulked up for a while now. And it just feels like something that John Jones, unless he gets caught, which is always a possibility, John Jones has enough IQ where he can almost extend this out a few rounds and get the finish whenever he decides, third or fourth round. Kind of like we did against Gon, where it's like the moment he decided to go for that takedown, go make for break, he submitted him. And it just makes me think this is going to be one of those ones where we're going to go, ooh, wow, every time Pereira cracks him or throws something heavy and John Jones rolls it or gets slightly hit, but it's never going to feel like Jones is going to be in serious danger. But at the end of the day, I think it's S tier because Pereira, after his return to the throne, he's very popular, and John Jones is always going to be a top 3, top 4, I would say. Probably top 2 right now. Most popular fighter. So it's definitely anything involving John Jones, especially when titles are involved. And this could be maybe for the light heavyweight if you give Jones enough time to trim off some of that body fat he's carrying around. But yeah. Moving on. I'm gonna put this higher, even though it carries some of the issues Pereira and Jones has, which is, as I said, Pereira would probably have to move up to heavyweight, which puts him at, I think, a pretty modest disadvantage. It's the same problem that Ilia is going to have if he fights Islam. Islam has already retreated to the welterweight division and shown that he fits there very nicely, destroying JDM over 25 minutes. You like it or dislike it, he did it, and he did it in spectacular fashion, even though it was very boring. And now Ilia is in a position where he can do what no one else has done and get 3 belts. The problem is his frame wise, he just doesn't feel like he fits at welterweight. And his wrestling is still always something that he did defend takedowns at time against Oliveira, but Oliveira couldn't defend takedowns against Islam. And welterweight Islam, go check out my other video now that he's on creatine stack. I feel like Islam at welterweight is just so unattainable for Ilia to beat. But if Ilia can get past Armin, who is now, we'll say a tier 2 version of lightweight Islam when it comes to the grappling and this and that and decent power, if he can demolish Armon like in spectacular faction, maybe like 2 to 3 rounds, but also face some adversity, stop takedowns, get off from bottom. If he can do all that and show like, hey, he's really good at that game, and we know he's a pretty big lightweight, he was a very big featherweight. If you give him enough time, it's like he has that same build as Volk where he could still cause problems at Islam. He's just going to need time to bulk up. But if he comes off a win with Armon, gets his first defense at lightweight, I'd say just full send it, book it, put that in the main event, and, just deal with the aftermath. If it ends up being a repeat of JDM Islam where you just take him down, Ilia gets no chance to actually test the power on the feet. It is what it is, but 3 belts on the line. This fight's been brewing for a while. It's definitely S tier, and it's probably at the top of S tier. Moving on, I'm gonna throw a wild card out here, but true fans will recognize it, and I think this goes at top of the A tier, and it could even go higher depending on if belts are on the line. Usman versus Chimaev 2. Now, if you watched the first one, it was super short notice. Usman, a current welterweight. Now he was coming off the couch, so he might have been a little heavy. It was Usman moving up to middleweight. It was a Middle East card. Same card that Volk actually did the short notice fight and lost to Islam. This was a short notice fight. Chimaev needed someone because I believe Costa pulled out. And it ended up being a banger. Obviously, Chimaev tested that Usman takedown defense, took him down, rode him, threatened to choke. But rounds 2 and 3, Usman turned it up. Chimaev supposedly broke his hand, so maybe that was the asterisk as to why it was so competitive. But goddamn, it was a competitive, and it came. Oh boy. Oof, that was rough. It came down to the fact that if you had to decide if it was a 10-8 round the first round, a lot of people scored it a draw and thought that Usman squeaked the second round and possibly squeaked the third, even though I believe he got taken down in the third round too. But he was putting Chimaev, like, it was probably Chimaev's, second toughest fight outside the Burns fight. And it's just something that Chimaev is now, after destroying oh my god, destroying the South African Drikas Duda DDP. Chimaev looks just like Islam at welterweight, where it's just like he's untouchable. There's no contender at middleweight that looks like a feasible challenge. And Usman's in a limbo where he has a win at welterweight. He wants to fight Islam, but there's more worthy challenges for Islam, and it makes me think, how can he get Jamal, or how can he get like Usman up to middleweight and get that rematch? And for him, he probably could go straight and fight, a top five contender if he has time to bulk lace and just fully commit. Give him, I'm trying to think, maybe give him like Strickland or something that frankly is very winnable for him. And yeah, I think this is one of those underrated fights that goes under the radar, and you think there's so much story to it. If Usman had a full camp, if he had time to bulk up to middleweight, if this was 5 rounds, he would have taken Chimaev's I think. And now that Chimaev has a belt at middleweight, again, it's very incentivizing. Usman obviously wants to reclaim his old throne, but in this day and age, getting 2 belts in 2 different divisions, that's better. Likeliness is so unlikely, especially if Usman ends up getting the shot against Islam and loses no less. But I think it's possible, and it comes down to actually if my prediction for the next and last fight were to come true, it could happen at welterweight. This one, I'm putting. It's not likely to happen for a multitude of reasons, but I honestly, after seeing how Islam looked at welterweight, and the fact that Chimaev has hinted that he could go back down to welterweight. I mean, he's into a lot of things. He hinted he could go get 3 belts, middleweight, lightweight, heavyweight, which is for him is probably attainable. But I don't know why, but I think this would be one of the most compelling fights, even though now you're just locking in the both. They have the same more or less fan base, so it doesn't have that much compellingness because I feel like it'd be too respectful and this and that. They don't want to transcend into like religious s warfare, this and that, 2 different countries, blah blah blah. I get all that. They don't want to go down an ugly path, and hence why they don't even want to fight. But I feel like Chimaev has hinted that now that Islam actually has the belt, a belt that Chimaev was chasing for a while until he missed weight, this and that, and they kind of forced him to a degree to move up to middleweight. He seems to hint that he could definitely move back down if he wanted to. And let's be real, Chimaev is probably the fighter with an O, let alone a belt, all that stuff that seems the most he doesn't seem he seems the hardest fight to win since like, prime Habib, where you just can't fathom a game plan that would actually result in beating this guy. Obviously, he has shown that he gasses out potentially if a fight gets dragged down to the third, let alone championship rounds. But the problem is he is like the most offensive wrestler we've seen, the most aggressive, top just pressure, like I said, since the Habib days. And even then, he's probably worse because he's a lot more aggressive and he's a lot more relentless on trying to get like the crucifix or a submission, and he has some decent submission game. The reverse side, though, is Islam showed that he is goddamn big at welterweight. He would still be just size wise, stature wise, smaller than Chimaev. But the thing is, Islam is one of the few people that Chimaev could fight that actually has the wrestling background, the true credentials, and awareness of positionings, where I don't expect would actually get mauled. I would think that Chimaev could take him down, especially early on, but I think Islam would be smart enough to never get into a compromised position. He's not getting submitted, and he's probably going to be able to fight his way back up. And Islam's probably the better striker. Chimaev might have underrated better power, but Islam is just significantly more well-rounded with his striking, and it makes me think, wow, how would this fight play out if Chimaev doesn't get, a flash win in the first round, and it starts going into the third, the fourth, and the fifth? And assuming this is at welterweight, where Chimaev actually would have to lose some of his, because he's been looking very big at middleweight. They actually might be pretty equalized, height versus just general muscle mass on Islam's side. And I think it would just be something at the highest level because the wrestling hopefully equals out. And now you just got 2 dudes that have pretty good chins and they both can crack. I think it would be a dream fight. The problem is it's probably never going to happen. And if it were to happen, it makes me think Islam would go up to middleweight, but he would probably stay at welterweight for the foreseeable future. So is it going to happen? Probably not. And I guess I'm very generous because there's no D, there's no D tier, so I should delete that now. Thanks for listening. Like, comment, subscribe if you liked it, and give me some ideas of what I should make next future tier list.